make so many of them.
Fly that thing?
Hurry!
Взрывайся немедленно!
Пошли.
It's good timing.
What a friend.
Who are you?
What the hell?
Do not try to run! We do not want to fair trial! Drop your weapon! Now! Five! This is your yours!
What do you say, John?
Activай обратно!
John Rambo has finally found peace living a quiet life in a Buddhist monastery in Thailand. However, when his former commander and only friend, Colonel Trautman, is captured during a covert mission in Soviet-occupied Afghanistan, Rambo must abandon his retirement. He travels into the unforgiving desert, forging alliances with local rebels to wage a one-man war and bring his mentor home. The air in the underground fighting arena is thick with the smell of stale sweat, cheap tobacco, and the metallic tang of blood. The room is dimly lit, illuminated only by swaying bulbs that cast long, dancing shadows across the concrete floor. The crowd is a tightly packed sea of screaming faces, their voices blending into a deafening roar that bounces off the damp walls. In the center of this chaotic ring, two men circle each other with deadly intent. One is a massive local champion, his dark skin slick with baby oil and the sheen of extreme physical exertion. The other man is a ghost from a past life. It is John Rambo. He moves with a quiet, terrifying grace that completely contradicts the loud environment. His long, dark hair clings to his forehead, plastered down by the suffocating humidity of the Thai summer. He is not fighting out of anger today. He is not fighting for personal glory or some misplaced sense of honor. He is fighting because the sharp, cracking rhythm of the wooden sticks clashing together is the only thing loud enough to drown out the echoes of gunfire in his mind. The local fighter swings a heavy wooden dowel with bone-breaking force. You can hear the violent whoosh of the air being displaced. Rambo ducks smoothly, the wood missing his skull by mere inches. He counters with a blindingly fast strike to the ribs. The sharp thud of wood hitting flesh echoes above the cheering crowd. The opponent grimaces, staggering back, clearly wondering why he decided to challenge a man who appears to be constructed entirely out of steel cables and repressed trauma. Rambo does not smile. His face is an unreadable mask of stoicism. Every movement is calculated, efficient, and brutal. He wins the match, accepting his cash prize with a simple nod. He is not keeping the money. Every single dollar he bleeds for in this dark, dingy basement goes directly to the Buddhist monks who have offered him sanctuary. Life at the monastery is a stark contrast to the violent pit. High up in the tranquil mountains of Thailand, the air is clean and crisp. The only sounds are the soft, rhythmic chanting of the monks and the gentle rustle of leaves in the mountain breeze. Rambo works as a builder here, spending his days under the baking sun repairing the ancient stone structures. You can hear the heavy, metallic scrape of his trowel against the brick, the solid thunk of a hammer driving nails into timber. He works shirtless, his body a map of terrible scars from a lifetime of endless war. Each scar tells a story of survival, of pain, of loss. He is trying to build something pure, to balance out all the things he has destroyed. The monks watch him with peaceful eyes, perhaps recognizing that this broken soldier is seeking a kind of redemption that prayers alone cannot provide. Also, they are probably thrilled to have a free, incredibly efficient construction crew composed of just one ridiculously muscular man. Rambo finds a fragile sort of peace in the repetition of the work. The rough texture of the bricks, the smell of damped clay, the stinging sweat in his eyes. It grounds him in the present moment. He is desperately trying to convince himself that his war is finally over. He wants to believe that the hands that once held heavy machine guns can now only hold tools of creation. But the world refuses to leave John Rambo alone. The fragile illusion of peace is shattered by the sound of an approaching vehicle. The low, guttural growl of a Jeep engine cuts through the serene mountain air, a harsh reminder of the modern world intruding on his sanctuary. Rambo pauses his hammering. His body tenses instinctively. He knows that sound. He knows what it brings. The Jeep kicks up a cloud of dry, choking dust as it comes to a halt near the temple grounds. Two men step out. One is Robert Griggs, an embassy official dressed in a crisp, clean suit that looks utterly ridiculous and completely out of place in the rugged Thai mountains. Griggs looks like a man who is already sweating through his expensive fabric, clearly uncomfortable in the wild. The other man is someone Rambo hoped he would never have to see again, yet the only man he truly respects, Colonel Richard Trautman. Trautman wears his military uniform with the same rigid authority he always has. His boots crunch loudly on the gravel as he walks toward Rambo. The reunion is not filled with warm embraces. It is quiet, heavy with unspoken history and shared trauma. Trautman looks at Rambo, seeing the scars, seeing the quiet desperation in his eyes. He knows Rambo is hiding from his true nature.
Trautman does not waste time with pleasantries. He explains that he is leading a covert mission to supply weapons to the Mujahideen fighters in Afghanistan, who are currently being slaughtered by the occupying Soviet forces. He needs Rambo. He needs the ultimate warrior to help navigate the treacherous terrain and ensure the mission is a success. Griggs pitches in, talking about duty, about the geopolitical importance of stopping the Soviet advance. Rambo listens in silence. He continues his work, the rhythmic striking of his hammer acting as a physical barrier between him and the men asking him to bleed again. The sound of the hammer is loud, sharp, and dismissive. Rambo looks at Trautman, his eyes filled with a deep, weary sorrow. He tells his former commander that his war is over. He says he has seen enough death, caused enough suffering. He states simply that his place is here, building, not destroying. Trautman tries to appeal to their shared bond. He tells Rambo that a man cannot deny what he is, that a sculptor sculpts and a soldier fights. It is a profound philosophical debate masked as a military briefing. Trautman is practically telling Rambo that his soul is permanently stained with the dirt of the battlefield, and to pretend otherwise is foolish. But Rambo stands firm. He refuses. He turns his back on the only father figure he has ever known. The disappointment on Trautman's face is palpable. The heavy silence that follows is thicker than the mountain humidity. You can hear the distinct metallic click of the Jeep door closing as Trautman and Griggs depart. As the engine revs and the vehicle slowly drives away, Rambo is left alone with his thoughts. The dust settles around him. He strikes the wood with his hammer again, but the sound is hollow now. The peace he felt earlier is gone, replaced by a gnawing, cold anxiety. He knows he has let down his friend, and deep down, he fears Trautman is right. The story violently shifts to the cold, unforgiving landscape of the Afghan mountains. The terrain is jagged, gray, and completely hostile to human life. The wind howls through the narrow passes, carrying the biting sting of freezing sand. Trautman is leading a small, heavily armed convoy through a narrow gorge. The tension is incredibly thick. The men are silent, their eyes scanning the rocky ridges for any sign of an ambush. The only sounds are the crunch of tires on loose rocks and the low rumble of the truck engines. Suddenly, the nightmare begins. The terrifying rhythmic thumping of heavy rotor blades fills the air, echoing off the canyon walls until it sounds like the sky itself is tearing apart. Two massive Soviet Hind helicopters crest the mountain ridge. They look like giant mechanical predators, their dark green hulls bristling with rockets and machine guns. Soviet helicopters in 80s movies always seem to possess a magical sixth sense for dramatic timing, appearing exactly when the heroes are most vulnerable. The attack is instantaneous and devastating. The helicopters unleash a barrage of rockets. The explosions are deafening, shaking the very earth. Brilliant flashes of orange and red fire illuminate the dark gorge. The shockwaves hit the convoy with physical force, flipping heavy trucks as if they were children's toys. The sound of tearing metal, shattering glass, and screaming men fills the valley. Trautman is thrown from his vehicle, the impact knocking the wind out of him. The air is instantly choked with thick black smoke and the bitter, acrid smell of burning diesel fuel and cordite. Through the smoke, heavily armed Soviet Spetsnaz troops descend from the helicopters, moving with ruthless efficiency. They overwhelm the surviving rebels in seconds. Trautman fights back, firing his weapon until it clicks empty, but there are too many of them. He is surrounded, disarmed, and forced to his knees in the dirt. A tall, imposing figure steps out of a landed helicopter. This is Colonel Zaysin, the local Soviet commander. Zaysin is the textbook definition of a cold, unfeeling antagonist. He possesses the kind of arrogant smirk that practically guarantees he will eventually be blown up in spectacular fashion by the end of the narrative. His uniform is pristine, contrasting sharply with the blood and dirt covering Trautman. Zaysin looks down at the American colonel with a mixture of contempt and cruel satisfaction. He orders his men to take Trautman away. The heavy metal doors of the helicopter slam shut, sealing Trautman's fate. As the helicopters lift off, roaring back into the bleak sky, the valley is left in burning ruin. Trautman is taken to an ancient, heavily fortified mountain fortress that the Soviets have converted into a heavily guarded military base. The walls are thick, rough stone, topped with modern barbed wire and glaring searchlights. Deep inside this fortress, Trautman is thrown into a cold, damp cell. The air smells of mold and despair. Soon, the psychological torture begins. Trautman is brought into a stark interrogation room. The only light comes from a harsh, swinging bulb that casts deep shadows over Zaysin's sharp features. Zaysin wants to know the location of the rebel supply routes. He wants to know the names of the Mujahideen leaders. He speaks in a smooth, calm voice, detailing the horrific things he will do to Trautman if he does not cooperate. He acts like a villain reading directly from the evil overlord monologue handbook, entirely confident in his absolute power. But Trautman is a rock. He sits in the hard wooden chair, his face bruised and bloody, but his eyes remain defiant. He stares right back at Zaysin, refusing to break. He tells Zaysin that the Soviet Empire is crumbling, that they cannot conquer a people who are willing to die for their freedom. Trautman's unwavering loyalty and his belief in the human spirit completely infuriate the cold, calculating Soviet commander. Zaysin resorts to physical violence, ordering his massive henchmen to beat Trautman. You can hear the sickening thud of heavy fists striking bone, the sharp gasp of breath leaving Trautman's lungs. Yet, even as he spits blood onto the cold concrete floor, Trautman smiles a bloody smile. He knows something Zason does not. He knows that his capture will awaken a sleeping dragon.
Back in Thailand, the tranquil life of the monastery is interrupted once again. This time, it is just Griggs who arrives. He finds Rambo working, as always. The official is even more nervous now. He walks up to Rambo and delivers the news with a trembling voice. Trautman's convoy was ambushed. Trautman has been taken prisoner by the Soviets. The government is disavowing all knowledge of the mission. They are not sending a rescue team. Trautman is entirely on his own. Rambo stops working. The hammer slowly lowers to his side. The silence that stretches between them is heavy and deeply uncomfortable. Rambo does not yell. He does not show any outward sign of panic. But his eyes change. The peaceful, weary look is completely gone. It is replaced by a cold, dark, terrifying intensity. The soldier has returned. Rambo knows immediately what he has to do. There is no internal debate anymore. The man who saved him, the man who shaped him, needs him. Rambo turns and walks away from the unfinished temple, leaving Griggs standing alone in the dust. Rambo retreats to a small dark room to prepare. He lights a single candle, the small flame flickering and casting dancing shadows against the bare walls. He opens an old, worn chest containing the artifacts of his violent past. He pulls out a map of Afghanistan, his thick fingers tracing the treacherous mountain routes. He makes his decision in absolute silence. He is going into the mouth of hell, alone, against an entire army. His first stop is the chaotic, bustling border city of Peshawar in Pakistan. The transition from the peaceful Thai mountains to the crowded streets of Peshawar is jarring. The air here is incredibly hot, thick with the smell of roasting meats, pungent spices, and heavy vehicle exhaust. The streets are a labyrinth of noise and movement. People shout in languages Rambo does not understand. Animals pull heavy carts, and the sun beats down relentlessly. Rambo moves through the crowd like a ghost, completely ignoring the chaos around him. He is a man on a singular, deadly mission.
He is looking for a man named Musa, a local supplier and weapons dealer who is sympathetic to the rebel cause. Rambo finds Musa in a dark, cramped shop filled with the smell of gun oil and old leather. Musa is a cautious man, deeply skeptical of this quiet, brooding American who wants to cross the most dangerous border on Earth. But Rambo's intense gaze and a large stack of cash convince Musa to act as his guide. Before they leave, Rambo needs a new weapon. A standard knife will not do. He needs something that reflects the monumental scale of the violence he is about to unleash. He finds a local forge. The heat radiating from the open fire is intense, baking the skin on his arms. The air smells heavily of burning coal and hot iron. Rambo takes a massive piece of high-carbon steel and begins to work. He heats the metal until it glows a brilliant, blinding orange. He places it on the heavy iron anvil and raises a massive forging hammer. The sound of the hammer striking the glowing steel rings out like a bell, sharp and deafening. Sparks fly in every direction, dancing in the dim light of the shop. With every heavy strike, Rambo is shaping the blade. But metaphorically, he is also reshaping his own soul. He is hammering out the peaceful builder and forging the warrior once again. He grinds the blade against a heavy stone wheel, a shower of bright sparks illuminating his intense, sweaty face. He quenches the hot metal in a barrel of thick oil, the hissing sound loud and aggressive. The resulting weapon is a monstrous survival knife, practically the size of a short sword. It is heavy, perfectly balanced, and terrifyingly sharp. Rambo slides it into a thick leather sheath. He is ready. The journey across the border into Afghanistan is a grueling test of human endurance. Rambo and Musa trek through absolute desolation. The landscape is a sea of jagged rocks, endless sand, and towering, snow-capped peaks in the distance. The heat during the day is oppressive,
beating down like a physical weight. The glare of the sun off the pale rocks is blinding. At night, the temperature plummets, the cold wind cutting through their clothes like a knife. They walk for days, their boots crunching softly on the dry, cracked earth. They have to avoid Soviet patrols, hiding in deep crevices and holding their breath as heavily armored convoys rumble past, the ground shaking violently beneath them. The sheer scale of the Soviet occupation is constantly apparent. Finally, exhausted and covered in a thick layer of pale dust, they arrive at a hidden Mujahideen encampment, nestled deep within a rocky valley. The camp is a vibrant, chaotic hub of resistance. It is filled with heavily armed men, resilient women, and children who have grown up knowing nothing but war. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, roasting goat meat, and the ever-present scent of gun oil and unwashed bodies. The rebels eye Rambo with intense suspicion. He is an outsider, a towering, silent American who looks like he wandered out of a different century. Musa introduces him to the rebel leaders, explaining his mission to rescue Trautman. The leaders are deeply skeptical. They tell Rambo that the Soviet fortress is impregnable, surrounded by minefields, heavily armed guards, and elite Spetsnaz troops. They believe it is a suicide mission, but they also respect strength and courage. To test his mettle, Rambo is invited to participate in a local game called buzkashi. If you have ever thought modern sports were too gentle, buzkashi is essentially extreme polo played with the headless carcass of a dead sheep. It is brutal, chaotic, and incredibly dangerous. The game takes place on a wide, dusty plain outside the camp. Dozens of men on massive, muscular horses line up. The air is filled with the snorting of the animals, the smell of horse sweat, and the shouting of the riders. Rambo mounts a powerful dark horse, his face set in grim determination. The signal is given, and the game erupts into absolute madness. The thunderous sound of hundreds of hooves pounding the hard dirt is deafening. A massive cloud of thick brown dust rises into the air, choking the lungs and blinding the eyes. The men violently whip their horses, clashing against one another in a desperate bid to grab the heavy sheep carcass. The sheer physical exertion required is immense. It is a terrifying tangle of flying hooves, yelling men, and flying dirt. Rambo throws himself into the center of the chaos. He uses his incredible upper body strength to muscle his way through the pack. The leather reins dig deeply into his hands. He leans down dangerously far from his saddle, the ground blurring past him, and grabs the heavy, bloody wool of the carcass. He hauls it up, fighting off the other riders who are actively trying to beat him with their riding crops. Rambo rides hard, his hair blowing in the wind, his face covered in a thick mask of sweat and dirt. He successfully drops the carcass in the scoring circle, winning the round. The rebels erupt in loud cheers. He has earned their respect. He has proven that he possesses the raw, untamed spirit of a warrior that transcends language and culture. During his time at the camp, Rambo forms a quiet bond with a young Afghan boy named Hamid. Hamid is a child who carries an assault rifle that is almost as big as he is. He is an orphan of the war, his parents killed by Soviet bombs. Hamid looks up to Rambo, fascinated by the silent American giant and his massive knife. Hamid represents the tragic loss of innocence that war brings. Rambo looks at the boy and sees a reflection of himself, a child whose life was forever altered by violence. Hamid desperately wants to join Rambo on his mission, wanting to fight the men who destroyed his family. Rambo tries to discourage him, speaking in low, serious tones about the horrors of combat, but the boy's resolve is unshakable. Rambo understands that you cannot talk a damaged soul out of seeking vengeance. The uneasy peace of the rebel camp is suddenly and violently shattered. The distant, ominous thrumming of helicopter blades begins to echo off the canyon walls. It starts as a low vibration in the chest and quickly builds into a terrifying, deafening roar. The camp erupts into absolute panic. Mothers grab their children and run for the caves. The men grab their rifles, shouting orders in the dusty air. The sky darkens as a squadron of Soviet Hind helicopters swoops down over the mountains, led by Zyson's command chopper. The attack is utterly merciless. They are not fighting an army, they are butchering a village. The helicopters unleash a devastating barrage of heavy rockets and high explosive incendiary rounds. the valley floor erupts in massive columns of fire and dirt. The explosions are so loud they make your ears ring, shaking the ground violently. Mud brick houses are instantly pulverized into dust. The air is filled with the horrific sounds of screaming civilians, dying horses, and the relentless mechanical chatter of heavy machine guns. The smell of burning flesh, exploded earth, and the sulfurous stench of high explosives chokes the valley. Rambo is thrown to the ground by a massive shock wave, his ears bleeding from the pressure. He scrambles to his feet, coughing on the thick dust. He is no longer a passive observer. The violence has ignited the fire inside him. He sees a rebel manning a heavy DSHK anti-aircraft gun fall dead, completely torn apart by helicopter fire. Rambo sprints through the chaotic rain of bullets and shrapnel, diving behind the sandbags. He grabs the massive, heavy metal grips of the anti-aircraft gun. The steel is burning hot under the sun. He racks the heavy charging handle with a loud metallic clank. He aims at the sky and squeezes the trigger. The gun roars to life, vibrating violently in his hands. The recoil is massive, shaking his entire body. Huge, heavy-caliber brass casings fly through the air, clinking loudly against the rocks. He unleashes a stream of heavy tracers toward the swooping helicopters. The sheer volume of fire forces the Soviet pilots to pull up and retreat, leaving a trail of black smoke in their wake. But the damage is done. The aftermath of the attack is a scene of unimaginable sorrow. The dust slowly begins to settle, revealing the total devastation of the camp. Fires burn lazily in the ruins. The air is thick with the heartbreaking sounds of weeping mothers and the moans of the dying. Bodies are laid out in the dirt, covered in bloody blankets. The vibrant, living camp from an hour ago has been transformed into a graveyard. Rambo walks slowly through the carnage. His face is smeared with soot and dirt. His eyes take in every horrific detail. The emotional toll on him is profound. He sees the suffering of these innocent people, and he realizes that this is the true face of the war Trautman spoke of. He is no longer just on a mission to rescue his friend. He is fighting for Hamid, for Musa, for every person lying dead in the dirt. The rebels, devastated by their losses, decide they must move their families deeper into the mountains. They cannot help Rambo assault the fortress. It would mean the death of their remaining people. Rambo completely understands. He tells them to go. He is going to do this the only way he knows how. He is going in completely alone. Night falls over the Afghan desert, plunging the world into a deep, freezing blackness. Rambo approaches the Soviet fortress under the cover of utter darkness. He is joined only by Musa and young Hamid, who refuse to be left behind. The fortress looms in the distance like a massive, jagged shadow against the starlit sky. The blinding beams of massive searchlights sweep slowly across the barren, rocky terrain, cutting through the dark like solid blades of light. Rambo moves with incredible stealth, blending perfectly into the shadows. He is a master of this deadly game. They crawl on their bellies over the sharp, freezing rocks, inching closer to the perimeter fence. The tension is almost unbearable. Every small crunch of gravel sounds incredibly loud in the dead silence of the night. Rambo reaches the thick, reinforced chain link fence. He pulls a pair of heavy wire cutters from his belt. You can hear the sharp, metallic snip as he expertly cuts through the thick wire, peeling it back just enough to slip through. They are inside the wire. The infiltration requires absolute silence and lethal precision. Rambo leaves Musa and Hamid in the shadows and moves deeper into the compound alone. He stalks through the narrow alleyways between the concrete barracks. He sees a lone Soviet guard walking his patrol route, his rifle slung lazily over his shoulder, completely unaware of the death approaching him. Rambo steps out of the darkness behind him. In one fluid, silent motion, he clamps a massive hand over the guard's mouth and drives his enormous survival knife deep into the man's ribs. The sound is a sickening, wet thud of steel parting flesh. The guard's body goes completely limp. Rambo lowers him silently to the ground, pulling the knife free. The metallic smell of fresh blood mixes with the cold night air. Rambo moves on, a phantom of vengeance leaving a trail of silent corpses in his wake. He navigates the labyrinthine corridors of the fortress, relying on his instincts and sheer luck. He finally locates the holding cell area.
He spots 2 guards standing outside a heavy iron door. Rambo uses his bow, drawing back the string with quiet power. The quiet twang of the bowstring is instantly followed by the sharp thud of an arrow burying itself deeply into a guard's chest. The second guard barely has time to react before Rambo is upon him, snapping his neck with a brutal, sickening crack. Rambo grabs the heavy iron keys and unlocks the thick metal door. Inside the cold, dark cell, he finds Trautman. The colonel is badly beaten, hanging suspended by his wrists from chains in the ceiling. Rambo cuts him down. The reunion is brief, intense, and incredibly emotional. Trautman looks at his friend, his face bruised and swollen, and simply smiles. They do not need words. The bond between them is unbreakable.
But their luck runs out. As they attempt to sneak back through the courtyard, the sharp, shrill blast of an alarm siren suddenly shatters the silence of the night. The harsh, pulsing wail echoes off the concrete walls. Brilliant, blinding floodlights snap on, completely illuminating the courtyard like a football stadium. They have been discovered. The quiet stealth mission instantly transforms into a chaotic, desperate firefight. Dozens of Soviet soldiers pour out of the barracks, firing their automatic weapons wildly into the courtyard. The night air is completely torn apart by the deafening roar of gunfire and the bright flashes of muzzle fire. Bullets spark and ricochet wildly off the stone walls, the sharp whining sounds filling the air. Rambo unleashes pure hell. He fires his assault rifle with deadly accuracy, dropping soldiers left and right. Trautman grabs a weapon from a fallen guard and joins the fight. They are moving and shooting in perfect synchronization, a 2-man army battling impossible odds. In the chaos, young Hamid, who had crept closer to the action, is spotted. A Soviet soldier fires. Hamid screams in pain as a bullet tears through his leg, dropping him to the hard ground. Rambo sees the boy fall. He roars in anger, laying down a massive wall of suppressing fire, cutting down anyone who steps into the open. He sprints through the hail of bullets, diving and sliding across the rough gravel, and grabs the wounded boy. Bullets chew up the dirt all around them. Musa covers their retreat. They manage to blow a hole in the outer wall with a stolen explosive charge. The blast is deafening, throwing chunks of concrete and rebar into the air. Through the choking dust and smoke, they escape into the freezing darkness of the desert. But the cost was high. Hamid is badly bleeding, and Rambo has taken a piece of sharp, jagged metal shrapnel deep into his side from a close explosion. They are bleeding, exhausted, and being actively hunted.
They retreat deep into a labyrinth of natural caves in the nearby mountains. The caves are dark, damp, and incredibly claustrophobic. The air is cool and smells heavily of wet stone and ancient earth. Water drips constantly from the ceiling, the sound echoing hollowly in the massive caverns. Musa and Hamid must leave to get the boy medical attention. Rambo stays behind to draw the pursuing Soviet forces away from them. He is completely alone in the dark. Now comes one of the most iconic, visceral, and genuinely uncomfortable scenes in 80s action cinema. Rambo rests against the cold rock wall. His breathing is heavy and ragged. He looks down at his side. A large, ugly piece of shrapnel is deeply embedded in his flesh. Dark crimson blood is soaking his shirt. He knows he cannot fight with this injury. He has to remove it. He grips the jagged metal with his thick, bloody fingers. He takes a deep breath, gritting his teeth, and violently pulls the shrapnel out of his own body. The sound is a wet, tearing squelch. He gasps in agony, his face contorting in pain. But pulling it out is only the first step. The wound is bleeding profusely. He needs to cauterize it to survive. Rambo takes a large caliber bullet from his belt. He uses his massive knife to pry the heavy lead slug out of the brass casing. He pours the fine, black gunpowder directly into the deep, bleeding wound in his side. The granular texture of the powder mixing with his blood is incredibly visceral and tactile. He takes a match. He strikes it against the rock. The small flame flickers in the dark cave. He brings the flame to the wound. The gunpowder instantly ignites. There is a brilliant, blinding flash of blue and orange fire.
The explosion happens directly inside his flesh. The sound is a sharp, aggressive hiss. The smell of burning hair, scorching meat, and sulfur fills the small cave space instantly. The pain must be absolutely unimaginable. Rambo throws his head back and unleashes a deep, guttural scream of pure agony that echoes endlessly off the damp cave walls. His entire body spasms. He collapses back against the stone, panting heavily, sweat pouring down his face. The wound is sealed. This is Rambo's ultimate healthcare plan, and it firmly establishes him as a man whose pain tolerance borders on the superhuman.
He does not have time to recover. The elite Soviet Spetsnaz forces, led by a ruthless commander named Kurov, enter the cave system. They are heavily armed, equipped with night vision gear, and they are hunting him like an animal. But Rambo is not the prey. In the dark, confined spaces, he is the ultimate apex predator. The cave fight is a terrifying game of cat and mouse. The Spetsnaz soldiers move slowly, their flashlights piercing the thick darkness, the beams catching the dust motes in the air. The tension is thick enough to choke on. The only sounds are the dripping water and the soft, cautious footsteps of the soldiers. Rambo uses the environment perfectly. He hides in deep crevices, clinging to the shadows. He strikes with silent, terrifying speed. He drops from the ceiling, plunging his knife deeply into a soldier's chest before the man can even scream. He uses his bow, the arrows flying silently through the dark, to pin men to the rock walls. The Spetsnaz guys clearly missed the day they taught peripheral vision at Evil Henchman Academy, because Rambo is picking them off one by one right under their noses. The combat is visceral, close quarters, and incredibly brutal. You can hear the snapping of bones, the dull thud of bodies hitting the stone floor, and the panicked, heavy breathing of the surviving soldiers who slowly realize they are locked in a cage with a monster. Rambo confronts Kurov in a brutal hand-to-hand fight on a precarious rock ledge. It is a clash of titans, heavy punches landing with sickening force. Kurov is strong, but he lacks Rambo's sheer, animalistic desperation. Rambo overpowers him, and Kurov is sent plummeting down into a deep, dark chasm, his scream fading into the blackness. Having survived the cave, Rambo does the unthinkable. He does not flee to safety. He turns around and heads right back into the heavily fortified Soviet fortress. He knows Trautman is still there, and leaving a friend behind is completely contrary to his very existence. This time, he does not bother with stealth. He is a one-man army bringing the apocalypse to their doorstep. He infiltrates the motor pool and rigs a massive series of explosive charges to the fuel tanks and ammunition dumps. He sneaks into the main command building, leaving a trail of dead guards in the brightly lit hallways. He finds Trautman being held in a different room, preparing to be executed. Rambo bursts in, guns blazing. The noise in the enclosed space is absolutely deafening. He tears through the executioners in seconds. Trautman grabs a weapon, a bright smile crossing his battered face. The dynamic duo is officially back in business. As they run out into the main compound, Rambo's explosives detonate. The entire fortress erupts into a massive, fiery hellscape. Series of colossal explosions tear through the night sky. Towering pillars of orange flame and thick black smoke rise into the air. The shockwaves shatter windows and blow heavy metal doors off their hinges. The sound is like the end of the world, a continuous, roaring thunder of destruction. Amidst this absolute chaos, Rambo and Trautman sprint toward a large Soviet transport helicopter sitting on the landing pad. Rambo jumps into the pilot's seat. The cockpit is a confusing array of Cyrillic dials, glowing green buttons, and complex switches. Rambo is apparently proficient in flying enemy aircraft entirely by instinct. He flips switches rapidly, the heavy turbine engine whining loudly as it struggles to life. The massive rotor blades begin to spin, chopping heavily through the smoky air. They lift off clumsily, the helicopter swaying heavily as Rambo wrestles with the controls. Zayson, utterly furious that his fortress is burning and his prisoners are escaping, leaps into his own heavily armed attack helicopter and gives chase. The sky battle is a desperate, terrifying ordeal.
Rambo's transport chopper is slow and clunky. Zason's attack chopper is fast and lethal. Zason fires heavy machine guns, the bullets tearing through the thin metal skin of Rambo's helicopter with loud, terrifying shrieks. Warning sirens blare violently inside the cockpit, bathing Rambo and Trautman in flashing red light. Smoke fills the cabin. The control stick shudders violently in Rambo's hands. The helicopter is taking critical damage. Smoke pours from the engine. They are losing altitude rapidly. The ground rushes up to meet them with terrifying speed. Rambo struggles to keep the nose up, but it is useless. The helicopter slams violently into the hard desert floor. The impact is a bone-jarring metallic crash of tearing aluminum and shattering plexiglass. The heavy machine skids across the sand in a cloud of dust, before finally coming to a smoking halt. Complete silence falls over the desert. Slowly, the thick dust clears. Rambo and Trautman drag themselves out of the mangled, smoking wreckage. They are bruised, bleeding, and entirely exhausted. They look around. They are standing in the middle of a vast, flat, endless expanse of pale sand and scrub brush. The sun is beating down on them mercilessly. Then they hear it, a low, deep, mechanical rumble that seems to vibrate through the very soles of their boots. The sound grows louder, more oppressive. They look toward the horizon. Slowly cresting the distant ridge is the entire might of the local Soviet armored division. Dozens of massive, heavily armored tanks, armored personnel carriers, and hundreds of ground troops. Zason's helicopter hovers ominously above the massive army. Rambo and Trautman are two exhausted men with a handful of bullets, facing down a literal mechanized army in an open desert. The odds are so incredibly skewed it is almost comical. Trautman looks at the approaching wall of armor, then looks at Rambo. They share a long, quiet look. It is a moment of profound acceptance. They know they are going to die here, but they are going to die together, on their feet, fighting until their last breath. Trautman asks Rambo what the plan is. Rambo simply replies that they are going to surround them. It is a moment of dark, gallows humor that perfectly encapsulates their unbreakable spirit. They check their weapons, the metallic clicks of their rifles sounding incredibly small against the roaring engines of the approaching tanks. The smell of diesel exhaust completely overwhelms the desert air. The massive tank turrets slowly rotate, aiming their huge cannons directly at the two lone figures. Just as the Soviet army prepares to utterly annihilate them, the impossible happens. A sharp, piercing sound cuts through the roar of the engines. It is the long, haunting blast of a traditional horn. The camera pans wildly to the opposite ridge. Cresting the sandy dune are hundreds upon hundreds of Mujahideen warriors mounted on horseback. They have returned. Musa leads the charge, raising his rifle high into the air. The sight is absolutely magnificent. It is a breathtaking clash of eras. Ancient cavalry armed with swords and rifles, charging headlong into modern, heavily armored tanks. The rebels let out a deafening, unified battle cry that shakes the sky. The horses charge forward, their hooves thundering against the sand, kicking up a massive, blinding sandstorm.
The collision of the two armies is pure, unadulterated cinematic chaos. It is the most expensive, explosive game of chicken ever recorded on film. The rebels ride fearlessly between the massive tanks, throwing explosive charges and firing their weapons at point-blank range. The tanks fire their main cannons, the explosive blasts sending massive plumes of sand and fire hundreds of feet into the air. The sound is an overwhelming, continuous roar of explosions, shouting men, screaming horses, and grinding metal tracks. The air is completely choked with thick brown dust and acrid black smoke. It is a swirling, violent maelstrom of death. Rambo and Trautman are instantly swallowed by the chaos. They dive into a shallow trench, firing their weapons into the swirling dust. Rambo sees an opportunity. He spots a massive Soviet tank whose crew has been killed by the rebels. He sprints through the chaotic battlefield, dodging heavy machine gun fire and massive explosions. He leaps onto the thick metal hull of the tank, his boots clanging loudly against the armor. He drops down through the heavy open hatch into the dark, incredibly cramped interior. The inside of the tank smells powerfully of heavy grease, diesel fuel, and sweat. He takes the driver's controls, wrestling the heavy metal levers. He is driving a massive tank without a license right into the heart of the enemy formation. He uses the massive bulk of the machine to crush smaller vehicles, the grind-nipping hull sounding horrific and absolute. He loads a massive heavy artillery shell into the main gun, the breech closing with a loud, ringing slam. Above him, Zayson is completely losing his mind. He cannot believe this chaotic rebel force is tearing his pristine army apart. He spots the rogue tank tearing through his lines. He aggressively banks his massive attack helicopter and flies incredibly low, heading straight toward the tank. Rambo sees the helicopter coming through his targeting viewport. He does not turn away. He steers the massive tank directly toward the low-flying helicopter. It is the ultimate showdown, man versus machine, heavy armor versus flying death. They are charging directly at each other, closing the distance at terrifying speed. The massive tank treads tear up the desert floor. The helicopter rotors chop the air violently. Zayson fires a continuous stream of heavy machine gun fire, the bullets sparking and ricocheting wildly off the tank's thick front armor, the sound deafeningly loud inside the tight cabin. Rambo holds his nerve. He stares through the scope, watching the helicopter grow larger and larger. The tension is stretched to the absolute breaking point. At the very last possible second, when the helicopter fills his entire vision, Rambo pulls the firing lever. The main gun of the tank fires with an absolutely earth-shattering roar. The entire tank violently rocks backward from the massive recoil. The heavy shell travels the short distance instantly and strikes the helicopter dead center. The result is a colossal, blinding explosion. The helicopter is instantly vaporized into a massive, expanding fireball of bright orange flame and black smoke. Pieces of burning metal rain down over the desert. Zayson is destroyed by his own arrogance and the unstoppable force of John Rambo. With their commander dead and their armor in ruins, the remaining Soviet forces finally break. They turn their vehicles around and flee into the desert, leaving the victorious rebels cheering wildly amidst the burning wreckage. The dust slowly begins to settle over the massive battlefield. The silence returns, broken only by the crackle of burning machinery and the snorting of exhausted horses. Rambo slowly climbs out of the hot, cramped tank. He is covered in thick soot, dirt, and sweat. He looks out over the vast, smoking landscape. He has won the battle, but the emotional cost is written deeply in his weary eyes. Trautman walks up to him, heavily favoring a wounded leg, but his face is full of deep pride and relief. They embrace warmly. Musa and Hamid ride up to them. Hamid is bandaged but smiling brightly, holding his rifle high. Rambo looks at the boy, offering a rare, genuine smile. He gives Hamid his lucky pendant, a silent passing of the torch, and a quiet prayer that the boy will find peace.
The fighting is over. The rebels begin the long process of treating their wounded and salvaging what they can from the destroyed enemy vehicles. Rambo and Trautman prepare to begin the long journey home. They walk side by side away from the battlefield, the massive, jagged Afghan mountains looming majestically in the background. The sun is beginning to set, casting long, golden shadows across the desert. Rambo is no longer running from who he is. He went to the edge of the world, faced down an empire, and realized that while he may desire peace, he will always answer the call to protect those he loves. The war in him is quieted for now, satisfied by the blood and the fire. He is a soldier, a survivor, and a deeply complicated hero. The camera slowly pulls back, leaving them as two small figures walking into the vast, endless horizon, the echoes of their incredible journey slowly fading into the quiet desert wind. As the smoke finally clears and the dust settles on the desert floor, we are left to ponder the true cost of warfare. The chaotic clash of empires and ideals is stripped away, leaving only the raw, human spirit completely exposed. Rambo's agonizing journey from the quiet monasteries of Thailand to the brutal battlefields of Afghanistan forces us to witness a deeply profound truth about the nature of sacrifice. True peace is rarely found in isolation, it is fiercely forged in the clarifying fires of duty and ultimate loyalty. Rambo embraces the darkest parts of his soul, suffering unimaginable pain, simply so others might survive. His unbreakable bond with Trautman proves that even amidst absolute carnage, love and brotherhood endure. Rambo III stands out as a massive spectacle of action, yet beneath the exploding helicopters and chaotic horseback charges, it is a deeply fascinating look at a soldier who absolutely cannot escape his nature. The incredible scale of the final battle remains an astonishing cinematic achievement for its era. Ultimately, it leaves us wondering, if our greatest strengths are born from our deepest traumas, can we ever truly lay our weapons down?